Welcome to Sync Up, a show about OneDrive, the intelligent files app for Microsoft 365. We are your hosts, Ankita, Kirti, and Jason Moore. I am Ankita Kirti, Product Manager on the OneDrive team.
And I'm Jason Moore, Group Program Manager for OneDrive. So this show is going to take you behind the scenes a little bit and shed some light on OneDrive and how OneDrive connects you to all of your files in Microsoft 365 so you can share and work together from anywhere while protecting your work from accidental loss and malicious attacks.
In each episode, we'll cover important topics and information about Microsoft OneDrive, including segments on a dedicated topic of the week, guest interviews where you will listen to a range of perspectives from experts who design and build OneDrive to customers and MVPs who use it. Next, we will have a segment on news and announcements. And finally, we'll end with a special topic.
And today, our guest speaker is Carlos Perez, Principal Design Manager for the Office 365 team. We'll be talking about the future of files experiences in Microsoft 365, so don't go away. There's more OneDrive Wonder coming your way.
Today's topic is the Coherent files experience across Microsoft 365. We know files are the building blocks to collaboration in a modern workplace, and Microsoft 365 provides a uniform files experience across all workloads. To better understand the future of OneDrive and the related experience, I think it's best to understand the past. And there is no one better than to tell us the history of OneDrive than my dear co-host Jason Moore. Or as I would like to refer to him as the first Avenger of the Microsoft Files universe.
That's too kind, Ankita, I think. I'm not sure if you watched the most recent movies with how that works out for the Avengers, but
I love Marvel. Let's not go there.
I'll take it.
So, Jason, OneDrive is literally your baby. You've been with the product for more than 10 years, and I'm pretty sure a lot of Office 365 loyalists in our audience today have been with you through the journey, including me. What would be interesting for them and me to find out is the behind the scenes of this decade-long journey, the evolution of the product, and your vision.
Sure. It's interesting, like, as much as I might get some credit and play a role here, there's been so much that's been happening for files and stuff in the cloud and collaboration for the last 10, 15 years that a lot of people contributed and make it what happened. So kind of, first up, you kind of have to recognize this landscape has evolved from enormous effort across a lot of different teams and a lot of people. At Microsoft, some of the things that we kind of talk about or refer to the past might be Mesh. If you remember Mesh. Mesh was a great project that we started, really starting with some of the P2P work as well that we did, or Folder Share, which was a company that we acquired back in, I believe, 2006. And Folder Share and some of the members of the Folder Share team still are on OneDrive to this day. And of course, what became OneDrive, which was originally SkyDrive, the work that we did in products like SharePoint, Groove, which joined the company around the same time as Folder Share and was another big acquisition for the company, brought in a ton of really talented people. There was kind of this set of moments where there was this almost a gold rush getting after, hey, we want to move to the cloud in a really big way and we want to unlock the power of it. And so for us, in the SkyDrive team and in the OneDrive team, really kind of our big focus and energy has been around, well, how do we get there? It's fine to talk about it, but what's the actual process of getting into the cloud? And then how do you actually find the value in it? We started thinking about things, we often referred to it as the file locker on a server somewhere. And it's obviously become so much more now when you think that every phone is natively kind of tied to the cloud these days. So we kind of started that journey from a bunch of these different inputs. And at the time, a lot of the influence was what was the latest tech du jour. So there was an enormous amount of energy in P2P. There was a lot of concern that if we didn't do point-to-point synchronization, we wouldn't be able to scale to the internet, that we would never be able to afford data centers that could take all of this data and hard drives to have all those things. And I think there's a lot of folks in the industry to thank across the board for blowing open the doors on what we could do with data centers and actually host that data in the cloud. So we kind of went through that voyage of, okay, we got to get all these things connected. We got to plug all of them in. Then what do you do with it? One of the first big scenarios that we did in a really significant way across the product was actually the camera roll backup, which we did in OneDrive Consumer. In fact, the Windows Phone 7 release was the first commercial phone that actually supported backing up your camera natively as part of the phone. It was a really great first from the Windows Phone team in combination with the team in OneDrive. But those were kind of different ways to start getting things into the cloud and tackle some of this journey on the tech side. We also had things in enterprise kind of saying, look, for a while by then, we'd really been focusing on how do we make the intranet more successful, more productive for people. And that's really where SharePoint had found so much of its success. And as SharePoint moved to the cloud, we kind of had the same kind of conversations. Okay, how are we going to take advantage of that? Where are the places that it shows up? This is where you get another one of these intersections of interesting kind of tech happening and this desire, where we got, for the first time, the Office web apps built in the cloud, where I could load an Excel spreadsheet and work on it right in a web browser without having to do anything else. Now, we weren't necessarily the first people to do something like that, but doing that at scale in consumer and business, and then being able to connect it with rich client apps and things like synchronization were really, really powerful. And to this day, I think powers a lot of the growth folks have seen with that journey to the cloud. The other one that I might mention, just kind of, thinking about this journey as we've been on it, has also been the evolution of us thinking about it from kind of moving to the cloud to being cloud first. So a lot of the conversations we had would always be, how am I going to get my files into the cloud? How am I going to do it? The camera roll backup, like I mentioned, starting sync and figuring out how to back up your files to the cloud, a very common scenario that people were interested in. But now it's really in a world where there is so much more data in the cloud. And while there's still a lot to get moved into it, it's actually more of how and when should I access that. And so features like Files on Demand in the OneDrive Sync client, where I can browse enormous sets of data without taking up all the disk space, or just being able to leverage SharePoint and the kind of incredibly powerful search to find files across my entire corporation. When you start thinking about organizations having petabytes of data at their fingertips and being able to organize that information, access that information, it's not about, hey, can my laptop have a backup of our cloud? It can't. It's too much. So it's really about how do we then go and build experiences that let me work with that data anywhere I could possibly go. And that becomes an interesting thing as we talk about our topic today around coherent file experiences, because it's less about data locality at any given moment and far more that I, as a user interacting, is kind of able to get access to these files wherever they are. And I think a lot of the journey now is shifting into how do I get that to work in a seamless way. So regardless of how I go and do it, I'm able to work with all those files and do things that are interesting, productive, collaborative, whether I'm a home user working with my files or I'm working in an office environment, a school environment, or somewhere else. So that kind of, I think, gives us some grounding and background here. I've done a little bit of my story there and a little bit of sharing on that journey, quick snapshots that we're always happy to talk about. But I think it's actually interesting for us to talk to our guest today, Carlos Perez. Carlos is a principal design manager for Office 365. We've been working together for about 5 years now on these projects. And you're going to tell us a little bit about the next chapter, Carlos.
Hi, everybody. As Jason said, I'm Carlos. Super happy to be here. We've been working for a while on a topic we call file coherence, which is really about making sense of the content that you have access to in your intranet or in your own personal work storage. We've done a lot of work in this area using intelligence and using the power of the web and the flexibility that we're allowed with that platform, and also reaching out to mobile apps and the latest developments there. You already can start to see some of that stuff in the latest versions of OneDrive, where we are showing you intelligent signals that help you find the files that matter quicker, and also give you access to your libraries for the team sites and the groups and sites.
That's awesome. Thank you, Carlos. Okay, as you're talking about all this, I'm really excited because we've been talking about it forever, and I think there's some really cool stuff happening. How would you kind of bring someone into it that's never been part of this conversation, hasn't thought about the challenges across all of the different software out there and all the different ways people, get things done?
So that's a really great question. The truth is we know that people organize and work together in very different ways. You may have a file that got created in your own OneDrive and you want to blow it up across your organization, or you may have a Microsoft Teams that's already well-structured and has a lot of channels where content already lives. We know these things at the end of the day don't really matter. You just want to get to the stuff that you care about. So we are leveraging things like the Microsoft Graph and the best of our UI tech in the web and in mobile to innovate on the ways that we present content to you.
Do you have any examples of things people would struggle with in the past?
For sure. So one of the things that we got a lot of feedback on a couple of years ago was that it was incredibly randomizing to try to share a file. If you tried to click share in Word, you had a different experience than you would inside SharePoint. And then as you moved from app to app, it just wasn't familiar or predictable. So our team has done a lot of work to make sure that we have a common experience for people that are sharing files. It respects those policies that different organizations may have around, say, a certain set of people aren't able to share files outside the company, whereas other people within the company might be able to. In the past, it was really hard to give customers a predictable experience about how they would turn those settings on and off, or how they would do something like sharing a folder without letting the recipient make any changes. With our predictable controls now that are available in Mac Finder, Windows Explorer, all of Office, whether it's on the web or on PCs, you get the same experience every time.
Or even on mobile.
Absolutely.
You said a couple of things that really I always love for us to talk about, and actually might be interesting to explore a little for this group as one of our kind of key design thinkers in this space. Predictable and familiar. How do you think about that in terms of user experience? Like, what does that look like when you're designing UI and really working through one of these challenges?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point that we grapple with every day. There is a sense of familiarity that comes with recognizing different experiences in the app. The shape of a button or the style of a form might trigger neurons in your head such that you immediately feel like you intuitively know how to use it. Oftentimes that's achieved just by making it look the same. But we don't fall into that trap of making consistency the end goal. We know there's need to have flexibility in there. And so just going back to my example of the sharing experience, there are a lot of settings that different admins might want to turn on and off within their particular organization. And our sharing control is actually incredibly intricate in the ways that it arranges itself to be as simple as possible. But within a single organization that has a certain set of policies, users will see the same set of options every time. That means that if you know how to use it in Word, you know how to use it in every other location.
Right. And one of the interesting things we find, especially with the explosion of devices and endpoints that people are using, there are people using the web, people using Macs, people using PCs, people using their phones, and they're all trying to achieve the same kind of outcomes of being able to work with their files. So I think that's actually a really powerful thing. And I love the time and energy we spend in that. All right. So that was kind of a framing for the basics. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you've now taken that and you're going forward? Like, what are some of the future things going to hold here?
For sure. That's a really good question. We not only think about things like this sharing panel that I just mentioned, but other surfaces that people encounter every day, such as the list of files, where now you may be able to hover over a file and get a card that has the full intelligence of the Microsoft Graph bringing you insights, or being able to have these quick cycles of collaboration where you can just open a file, mention someone in it, and engage them in to be more productive. We've done the work to do that in Office files, and we're now deploying the ability to be able to do it in other file types as well, because we know you definitely work in PDF and images and every other piece of content. We're also looking at different signals that matter to people in terms of understanding the value of the content around them and the content that they make. One example of that is the trending signal. There's an arrow that appears when a file is significantly more viewed or utilized than the ones around it. And it's actually a really great feedback mechanism when you are producing content and creating content for your colleagues to know what's resonating and what's driving change.
I'm always interested when I see that to see how well things are going. And in particular, using the file hover card and seeing stuff like who's been reading that document. Like I know, and Ankita, you and I have talked about this before, like going into a meeting that I've sent a document about beforehand, I love to see that people have actually seen that document, and I'm not going to start the meeting with, did you read the document?
Yeah.
Thank you, Carlos. That was really interesting to know from your perspective. Now, we spoke about the life cycle of a file, the different apps that we use while working on those files. And we often get a question from our customers as to where do we store the file? What would you recommend to the customer?
That's a great question. It's something that not only do we hear in conferences, but I'll have to admit I've heard myself when I introduce myself to people at parties and I tell them what I do. So I absolutely can relate with this being a common ask that we get. The answer is that no matter whether you are storing stuff in your own OneDrive, say to begin working on something and you feel like it's not ready to share, or whether you're moving it to a shared library that belongs to a site or to a Microsoft Teams location. These places have different memberships and they may evolve, but we're giving you access to all those locations through the OneDrive experience. So say, for example, you know of a group that has a membership that's tied to a particular project or to a particular division, then it makes sense that if that's your first audience, that you would just put the file there. And we give you commands to be able to move a file that you may have in your own OneDrive to those shared libraries easily. You can also just drag and drop through File Explorer if you're using our sync client.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think that move and copy, I've heard from a lot of customers that they are really excited about that particular feature where you can easily move or copy a file from OneDrive to a different destination in OneDrive or in another shared library.
One of the interesting things, I think, Carlos, that you kind of also are getting to here is different organizations function in different ways. And we know that from a lot of the different customers that we've worked with on these kind of capabilities is that some of them will have methods and rules where they want to start in certain particular ways and have kind of their process where that's necessary. And others will be just very different. And that can be true the different verticals they're in, pharmaceuticals versus educational, but also can be true just different cultures and different companies. And we really, I think, spent a lot of energy in your team thinking about how do we make the tool that's adaptable and is going to work best for people in each moment. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about that?
I think our storage tools will get more sophisticated over time. We continue to invest on shared libraries and the functionalities there and being able to access them with no compromise in functionality through OneDrive, whether that's the mobile app or the website. And we know organizations will continue to use these in ever more sophisticated ways. The flip side to that is no matter where these things might be, even if they're like a couple of folders down in some team or site shared library, we're also working with tools like Office.com and the recent list there and the intelligent recommended tiles that bring you content, no matter where it is in these places, to the front and center for you to be able to access easily based on your usage and based on patterns that we see where people might be able to leverage this stuff quicker. So we're working sort of a two-pronged approach. One is to make it really easy to have a rich, well-structured storage location, but also to make it sure that the surfaces that you start your morning with don't really make you think about that stuff. They can just bring the content to you.
No, I love that. And I think that's a great kind of explanation of Microsoft 365 all up, where we really want to meet people where they are with the tools they need and make sure that they have that, like we've been talking about, coherent experience regardless of where they're starting their day, as you said. Okay, so that's talking a little bit about the end user experience of taking on the software and running with it. How do you think about the advantages for administrators and what is valuable for them out of that?
Sure. I think it's really important to make sure that, to your point earlier about different industries and verticals, that we create a really useful product for a broad range of needs. There are companies or industries that may have really strict requirements where they have to be able to enforce as well as they can a set of policies that we know may not fit other companies. We don't want to do a one-size-fits-all approach. And so when you use the OneDrive and SharePoint Admin Center to look at things like the sharing controls, we really try to make sure that we're mapping to a broad set of needs. And we're trying to make sure that it's really easy for an admin to understand the impact of their choices there. If you heard me talk about things like sharing controls earlier, one of the examples that we can do is we can enforce links that are shared externally to have an expiration date, because you want to make sure as an admin that you don't have sort of an ever-growing leak of URLs being published out there. That's an example that we use in our own company to protect our stuff, and I know that's a very popular choice amongst admins as well.
I also think it's very helpful for the admins that they have one common console and dashboard that they can use to monitor all the apps under Microsoft 365 and related data and users. And we have customers that migrate from competition to OneDrive. And one of their major advantages is that they don't need to go through 2-3 different apps in just managing content, right? Because there's content in a competitor app and there's content here. So that also is really great, that all our security and compliance dashboard is really intuitive and reliable.
One of the things I'll add is I really like the way that we are shipping these shared experiences amongst many places. For example, if you have a site that's enforcing a policy like files requiring check-in or check-out, which is a way to safeguard against unwanted edits, it's not something that most shared libraries will use because you want people to be able to collaborate using the best of Office's real-time collab. But in places where that is important, we want to enforce it with a common language. And so one of the things you will see now is we have an icon to represent when you have checked out a file. We have an icon to represent when someone else has checked out the file. They're very similar icons, but they differ in very nuanced ways. Because if you're the one checking out a file, you're holding up the work and you want to make sure that that is urgently seen. So that icon, for example, is red, it's bold, it's in your face, it's in the items that need attention view, which we show in in shared libraries. And then there's the sort of more subtle, hey, someone else has checked out this file, be a little patient and you'll get back to it. And these icons show up consistently in different endpoints and they go away if that particular site doesn't have that policy applied to it.
So that was great, Carlos. And we spoke about a lot of features and pretty sure all of them were advantages of OneDrive and SharePoint and best practices of how you use a file, when to share, how to share, which app to store in. But if there was one particular best practice that you would want to share with our listeners, be it an admin or an end user best practice, what would that be?
I think one that I would consider downright transformative, at least in the way that we work, was when we were able to enable company shareable links. The interesting thing about that feature is that it really makes you not have to think about who's the audience that you're sharing to, but in a way that maintains the governance around files that are not supposed to be put outside of your company. We used to have a sharing model in SharePoint many years ago, if you remember, where you had to know every possible recipient. And the truth is, the modern collaboration simply doesn't work that way. You have a trusted circle of colleagues that you want to be able to access stuff, and you don't want it to go any further than that. So if I had to point to one best practice that I think, as a first-hand account, I can tell you has transformed the way at least that we work and the way it's removed friction without breaking the policies that our IT folks want to make sure that we stay within, it would be the company shareable links ability, turning that on.
Now, we're going to move forward a little bit here, and we have a little bit of human kind of interest with our interview candidates that we always want to bring up. For me, I'll go with my first question, then Ankita's going to have a question. And this is a question for the whole group. Everyone can answer. But what's your favorite travel destination in 2019?
Oh gosh, I wasn't expecting this question. Okay. Well, I have to say, definitely my hometown of Isabela, Puerto Rico. That's where I'm from. And I'm, according to my mom, way overdue for a visit, but also according to myself, because I need to go eat some of my local food.
Awesome.
So,
That's nice. For me, it would be Munich. It just has such a happy vibe. Everyone prefers to drink beer rather than water. And everyone is just happy. Like in the middle of the afternoon, they're just out in beer gardens. I hope we can talk about beer, right, on the podcast. I was not sure because Jason gave me a very weird look.
Awesome. Okay. I haven't been to Munich, so I'm definitely have to put that. And I've been to Puerto Rico, but I haven't been to your hometown, so I have to put that on my list. For me, one of the destinations that just blew me away was going to Myanmar and exploring that. Wonderful country, beautiful vistas, wonderfully warm people. It wasn't what I expected, and I'm so glad I got the chance to go there. And so I would highly recommend if folks get the opportunity and chance to check it out.
Nice. Well, if you come to my house, I'm sure my mom will cook for you.
Awesome. It's a plan.
So even I have a question. Carlos and Jason, if you want to recommend a podcast to our listeners, what would that be?
So maybe I'm kind of an old school designer, but I will have to say that 99% Invisible is by far one of my most favorite podcasts. It's about design and architecture, really fascinating topics. The name comes from the fact that great design is often unseen, invisible, and just through and through, pretty fascinating set of topics. And not that long. They're nice. You can get through like 8 or 10 of them in a road trip.
Jason quickly checked the podcast that he listens to, and now he will let us know the best podcast according to him.
I wanted to get the name right because I always trip on telling it to other people. And I've only recently started listening to this podcast, but I absolutely love it. And like you said, this is a great one, I think, for road trips in particular, but my whole family's enjoyed listening to it. And that's No Such Thing as a Fish. And it's a podcast where they essentially talk about different facts and they kind of explore different interesting, surprising facts over a course of about 45 minutes. And it's just every single time fascinating. You learn something you wouldn't have known before and always kind of takes a different angle than I would have thought. So highly recommend that one. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And I would recommend Intrazone for everyone.
We should note for viewers at home that Mark Cashman is in the studio today watching over us so that we do as complete and thorough a job as he would expect us to do with such an expert in podcasting as him. Those great set of destinations, cool set of podcasts. For all of you listening, if you didn't catch that, don't worry. We'll have it in the show notes and you'll be able to link off to all of those. Thank you so much, Carlos. I think this has been a really interesting conversation, kind of peeking at some of the big challenges and interesting conversations that we have around M365 and what we're doing with coherent file experiences there. So that wherever you work with these files, however you encounter these files, you're able to have a really familiar and comfortable experience while you work with them. It's been so much fun to have you, and it was great that you were on the inaugural version of Sync Up. Really happy that you were able to come on board, and I hope you had a good time today.
I did. Thank you both for having me.
All right. Well, that was Carlos Perez, Principal Design Manager in the Office 365 team. Carlos has deep experience with files, folders, everything OneDrive and SharePoint, and we're incredibly lucky to have had him this month to talk about it. Coming up next, we're going to go into detail on this month's news and announcements. Ankita?
So, in this section, we will discuss news and announcements ranging from feature releases, upcoming events, and customer evidence. Considering this is our first episode, I will take you through the roadmap highlights since SharePoint Conference back in May.
And of course, if you weren't able to make it to the conference, which was a ton of fun, we have video of all the sessions up online, as well as a great blog post summarizing them. We'll link those in the show notes so you can follow up afterwards.
Great. So over the past few months, we have released functionalities to make external sharing more secure. We announced the password-protected links, adding the ability to set custom passwords while sharing a file or a folder with anyone links to colleagues within and outside your organization. You can share the password separately with your intended recipients, and they will be required to enter the password in order to access the shared content.
I love that feature, and it's actually one that came out of a lot of our conversations with organizations that are relatively large, working with smaller vendors or other partners that might not have the exact same kind of setup as them. And so this ability to have password on those links means that you can have a little more security and just a little more peace of mind when you're sharing and working with these people outside of your company. I just love that capability, and I really like that we've been able to respond to that ask from the community.
And it really pairs well with the blog download feature that we released some time back, which again makes sharing with anyone link very secure. We have also made business-to-business collaboration easier by announcing the integration of external sharing with Azure AD B2B. So now when a user shares an item with an external recipient, a guest account is immediately created for that external user in Azure Active Directory. That is, if one does not already exist. As a result, any sign-in or conditional access policies in place in your organization will take effect on all those external users, while still keeping the simple one-time passcode recipient experience. This feature is currently in preview.
I love this feature because not only has it been asked for a long time, it's something that we know is just a critical part of having that control over your organization and sharing outside of it. This has been in preview for a little while now. We've been getting some really great feedback. If you're interested and you're out there listening to us, definitely check it out. We'll make sure there's links in the show notes so you can go try it out yourself in your organization. Along with facilitating controls over external sharing between businesses, we also rolled out capabilities in the OneDrive Sync client to let users sync libraries and folders that have been shared from other organizations. So up until now, you've been able to sync anything within your organization, but now you'll be able to sync with folks in other organizations that are sharing with you. It's a really powerful feature. It works in tandem with the external sharing integration that we've been doing, and it requires recipients to have a guest account in Azure AD. So you can see how a lot of these pieces that we're talking about are really coming together so that the end-to-end experience is so you can get access to and work with these files regardless of where they come from, regardless of where you sit, and on any endpoint.
We also launched a broad design overhaul to the OneDrive mobile app, and a lot of credit goes to Carlos and the team. This design overhaul included a refreshed design for OneDrive app on iOS, bringing common experiences that align with the suite of Office apps, having Microsoft Search integrated front and center. We also released an updated recent view on mobile that now includes PDFs and scans, an updated experience for PDF annotation designed to make the markup experience more intuitive and touch-friendly. And finally, a new OneDrive-powered file picking experience in Outlook for iOS, making it very easy for end users to navigate and browse through a consistent and familiar recent list of files and folders in your OneDrive, email attachments, as well as frequently accessed and followed shared libraries.
And in fact, you can find all of this in our blog that summarizes all these releases to date. I'll make sure, again, in the show notes, you have easy access to all of those.
Finally, we also released admin functionalities that can help admins configure team site libraries to sync automatically as a part of a OneDrive deployment, or leverage administrative templates in Microsoft Intune to manage OneDrive, and set per site anyone expiration link policy.
And so it's a great list of announcements that you just ran us through, Ankita, since SharePoint Conference in May, which again was an awesome event, and we really have a lot coming out from that. But I think you're about to tell me that that's not all.
Yeah, that is not all. This was just 2 months worth of announcement. And now that you're all caught up with these announcements, there's more to come. So last month, we released the comments and mentions on all file types, which Carlos also mentioned earlier. It allows you to work together not just in Office documents, but with photos, CAD drawings, PDFs, and more. We also announced Popular Around Me in the Shared With Me view on web that will now surface files which are recommended based on your working relationships to help you find relevant and trending information faster and discover content you might not even be aware of. And lastly, the ability to get a link to individual slide to share with recipients.
You can learn about all these features and much more in our tech community blog by visiting aka.ms/OneDrive/blog. We also comment in the community there, so we're always interested in your feedback and hearing back from it. Link to that will be in the show notes. And of course, I'll also recommend that you check out the OneDrive.uservoice.com, where you can suggest improvements and features that the team will review and look at for future releases of OneDrive.
So Carlos, after listening to all the features that we've released lately, can you let the listeners know what your favorite OneDrive feature is?
For sure. There's one feature that's very near to my heart because I've been helping the team work on it recently, which is the intelligent list of shared libraries that appears on the left nav of OneDrive on the web. We are working with the Microsoft Graph team to pick up the signals of what are the places where you are doing most of your work and showing it automatically there without you having to reach into other destinations, navigate too far. You just go to your company's OneDrive app and it'll be right there.
Awesome.
Cool. That's great. I love that feature too.
Thank you, Carlos. That was a great feature to mention. Now, coming to events, we have recently delivered 2 webinars and hosted 2 AMAs. The first webinar and AMA focused on redefining mobility with OneDrive, in which we discussed the various productivity features of the OneDrive app on iOS and Android. And the second webinar is on how you can simplify collaboration and external sharing with OneDrive. Watch the recordings and get notified about the upcoming webinars by going to our easy URL, aka.ms/OneDrive webinar. We'll include the link in our show notes for this episode.
And of course, those webinars are great, but you can also meet the OneDrive team and see us at events like Ignite, where we're going to show up in a really big way. And of course, Ignite the tours, we take it around the globe. There's a number of other conferences we're at, but those 2 are incredibly exciting to us, and we look forward to seeing all of you there.
Before wrapping the news section, I will take a minute to announce a recent case study that we have published on Ecolab. Ecolab is a global chemical company that prioritizes sustainability, making water conservation, renewable energy, and food safety its top missions. And they found that the solution to their collaboration woes was
OneDrive.
It's an amazing customer story on how they migrated from Dropbox to OneDrive to simplify and lower their license costs, as well as take advantage of the integration of OneDrive and Microsoft 365. You can check out our Customer Spotlight blog on Ecolab at aka.ms/OneDrive/blog. Next up, Jason will delve into a very special topic that is extremely important to me personally, our team, and Microsoft.
One of the things that we thought would be really exciting to talk about on the podcast is how do we think about diversity, inclusion, and belonging in our team? And how are we implementing actions around that to just make a better team and a better place to work? And I thought it might be interesting for us to kind of go over some of our cultural priorities and talk about how we're implementing these things in our team. Now, these conversations can be difficult and they can be challenging. So I ask everyone to be open-minded about it and think about how we're going to kind of connect and as a community come together. But if in your organization you're thinking about these things, maybe this will be helpful and maybe this will be a good pointer to it. You know, our first cultural priority is actually relatively simple and it's really about our investment here all up. We say we grow a diverse and inclusive culture, sharing resources on allyship. We explore together and we celebrate the benefits of inclusion. That's really a statement about us all kind of coming together to agree that this is something we wanted. And in fact, one of the things that we took as an action was to sit down and have these conversations in the organization. Did we all see the benefits of diversity and inclusion? Did we understand it? Some of those can be really tough conversations. Not everyone is going to come from the same place. But having that conversation is really important. And then we augmented that by finding really interesting videos from some great TED speakers to kind of educate all of us and get some other perspective. And that actually kind of translates in a very quick way in short 5 and 15-minute clips to understand these different perspectives for it. And in addition, for my team, I bought them the book Better Allies, which is a great book on kind of understanding in the tech industry in particular, how can you be a great ally to others? And anyone can be an ally to others. It's really about being able to take your privilege and leverage that to support and help others. So I highly recommend looking into that. We'll share in the show notes some links to some of these resources, including a great Twitter feed, email digest, and more that can help you start that conversation and really thinking about it.
That's really encouraging. And from personal experience, I know how important this is. Being an Indian female recruited 3 years back with an experience of just 4 years in sales but really wanting to do something in product management and being close to product, I know how important it was that my hiring manager then had the confidence that I will be able to do it when all my peers had an average age of 10 to 15 years. So when you talk about diversity, usually people think it's just gender or it's just culture and geography. But it also, a lot of times, for me, it was the number of years of experience, because I know there have been organizations or teams that have turned my peers or me down because you need to work more to gain more experience. And it's a vicious circle. Like, if I don't get opportunity, how do I work more? So this is a very encouraging conversation and instills a lot of confidence in anyone who would be wanting to get that support.
And of course, as each of you starts that journey of thinking about what it means to be an ally and how you can be an ally for someone else, it's just fantastic. But it's also critical because you never know when you're going to need an ally yourself. And so we can all support each other and really have a better work experience and a better life experience across that.
So with this, we've come to the end of our podcast. I would like to thank our guest, Carlos Perez. To learn more about OneDrive and the latest developments, please follow our tech community blog at aka.ms/OneDrive/blog.
Please do reach out to us with questions and feedback. You can reach us on Twitter, whether with the @OneDrive handle, @Jasmo, that's me, or @Ankita Kirti 21. And definitely visit our show page for links, resources, and more at aka.ms/syncup. And yes, that will be in the show notes. Subscribe to the show wherever you get podcasts, and you'll hear our next update where we're going to bring a whole lot more.
Thank you for listening to Sync Up, a show about OneDrive, the intelligent files app for Microsoft 365. We are your hosts, Ankita, Kirti, and Jason Moore. And we are very excited to be presenting this new show for our OneDrive fans and the folks that we are going to convert into fans. So stay tuned for the next month's episode and the episodes to come. We'll have a lot of topics that will cover end user, administrators, and developer scenarios. Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you for an amazing first episode, Ankita.
Yeah, you're welcome, Jason. You were a good co-host as well. I mean, considering you're thanking me, I'm taking it for granted that I was a good one.